Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. So, where we left off, we read chapters 5 and 6 last time. This time we will be reading chapters 7 and 8. Alhamdulillah.
Mm.
Um, and maybe we'll just do like we can just have open conversation for 5 minutes, and then we can jump into reading the first chapter, inshallah, chapter 7. But what are some maybe like an aha moment that you may have had from week 5 and 6? And just as a recap, week 5 was going over, let me see here. I'm on week 6. But week 5 was focused on recovering a sense of possibility. And then week 6 was focused on recovering a sense of abundance. And I know Noor and I, we've had some conversations last week about specifically around recovering the sense of abundance. And I always like to say, this is, for me, this is where this book gets really juicy. And like this, like week 6 forward is where I feel like it really starts to get juicy. But I would love to hear.
What were your thoughts on the abundance? I'm curious.
Nora, I'll pass it to you. I feel like I talk too much and I
Actually,
have.
no, I'm going to jump in. So, what I get this, so, it's interesting because, so my husband's a psychotherapist and he's done the Islamic psychology,
Oh yeah.
um, right, with Dr. Rothman and stuff. And so I was going through the writing pages with him, and he said it's interesting because that's really something that a therapist from an Islamic psychologist perspective actually utilize, where you start to really become reflective and start to realize a lot. And so a lot of stuff comes out in your writing. So what I've noticed with, i think I think from a writing perspective, I can appreciate, because I'm not doing this for writing a book. I mean, you never know, but I'm doing it more for me to get back in tune with my writing, right? And so I think what these pages have done for me, though, from a therapeutic perspective, is it actually has touched upon a lot of my own personal things. And I think that's something that she solidifies. I actually think this woman might be Muslim in many ways, because she's just, there's so many things that she probably links with her Christian faith. Like, there's so many nuances. But so I think that the therapeutic pages really do sorry, the learning pages are very therapeutic. So yes, they can hone in on writing, but I think it can also touch in on things that um that we don't want to touch on. And this is where the psychology piece comes in, where this is what's happening. As we get older, I'm 53. So for me, I think these two chapters, and I think everybody's, and that's why I asked about your thoughts, because I think from an age perspective, your focus is very different with every chapter, right? So abundance could be, when you're younger, that need for, okay, I need to get the house, I need to get the car, I need to get all those things. But then from a spiritual perspective, abundance can also be, I'm okay. Like, for me, money is essential, but money is essential just to get me through and make sure I have in my bank. But overall, I'm okay. Um, so that's kind of what I got from these chapters. And I find that for me, it's more about um, looking at just looking at yourself and sort of reflecting, like, are you feeling that you've been nurtured, and are you, I guess the bottom line is, are you content? Are you content with what the parameters you have? And I think that's something that that I got from the chapters. Possibility, I think, I'm a big advocate. I think Islamically we've been told knowledge is key, knowledge is essential, and it doesn't stop from that typical framework we see of, you go to university, you get married, you have a house, a car, all that kind of stuff. We're starting to see different people having different pathways, and I think that's important to value. So possibility, can be so many different things, from a spiritual perspective, from a familiar perspective, from a friendship perspective. But I think the thing with possibly that hit me was the need to be very simple. Simplicity is key. I know those are the kinds of things, those are the themes I kind of pulled out from those chapters, if that kind of makes any sense.
100%. Some of the things that Nora and I have talked about, specifically around abundance, was really,
Hmm.
you nailed it, was particularly around the other forms of abundance, spiritually speaking. So, like the different forms of risk that each
Yes.
has, and finding such fullness and peace and contentment in the different types of risk and gifts. So your abundance could come from your family lineage. It could come from the joy and the gratitude that you carry in every aspect of life, and the way in which that affects other people. That could be a huge, massive portion of your risk, right? That so it's not, so looking beyond the monetary realm and looking beyond the material realm and thinking about what ways are we already full. And I think, especially as creatives, to then be able to take the areas where we are already, naturally resourceful, creative, and whole, and to be able to then allow that to be, sort of this vehicle, that moves us on our path and really grounds us in purpose, with our creativity. And so I am grateful and appreciative for what you just shared, because it's so rich, and really aligned with a lot of the conversations that we've had also. Alhamdulillah. Nora, did you have any aha moments that kind of came from either chapter, actually?
I was thinking about this literally earlier today, and it's like it's so funny. I feel like in my earlier creative journey, like 2, 3 years ago or something like that, I feel like I was operating from that place of scarcity where I'm like, I was limiting God's ability. I believe like I was limiting my ability to be creative, i.e., limiting Allah. And I was telling myself, like, I have all these ideas and I have all of these things, but like a part of abundance is trusting Allah will provide, right? And a way to put and a way for you to practice that is by understanding that if Allah can create the mountains and create the moon and the sun, then he can help it. Then what makes you think that you won't, by with his help, you will make your project come to life? So there's something really beautiful in that, in knowing that, like, and I feel like I shifted from that place of scarcity to a place of abundance, because having tawakkul is also very important. Having trust in Allah is also very important. I don't remember what I said last week, but um, I think I was thinking about that recently. Yeah.
I think the other piece that I've learned, I honestly, there's a lot of psychology in what she's doing. And I think the fact I like I think what is interesting is I feel not, it isn't an aha moment, but I think we have been taught to suppress our creative self. And I think that's something that we've been are doing. And I think that she sort of says, whether it's writing or anything else. But from a psychology perspective, one of the things my husband was telling me was they have been told, go out in nature, go and walk, be in touch with nature, do something creative, where it's painting or anything else, like have that time to do those creative things. And there's just so much alignment in trying to, I think what she's, and that's why I think there's so much, I see why people gravitate to her from a spiritual perspective, because there's so many things she touches upon about having us do that and just trusting ourselves. And I think I think the bottom line is time is really of the essence. We don't have a lot of time. And I think what you do with your time is valuable. And I like how she presents that, you can sit down and start writing your pages. I actually bring my pages with me to work and I'll just continue writing in them. And if I'm like, okay, I'm going to just start writing stuff about a particular situation, it helps. So, yep, a lot there that we can talk about for sure.
Alhamdulillah. I really appreciate that, especially the aspect where you're bringing in, like, she really is, it's very methodical the way that she's approached
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
this book. And it makes so much sense of why she would do it in this way, especially honoring all of the different, faith traditions and practices, but also kind of grounding in a certain level of consistency in the way in which the language that she uses, and also really targeting sort of the conditioning and then the unconditioning work that has to happen. You can't really do that without, coming from a very psychological framework. And so I really value that. It's something that, as a holistic life coach, that when I went through this book the first time and the morning pages, it's so aligned also just with the life coaching, model, which really grounds people in remembering that they're whole.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
one of the questions that I frequently ask clients is, who were you before
Yeah.
before, the world told you who you needed to be? Who were you before the world told you who you needed to be? Who were you before your family culture told you who you needed to be? Before, your communal norms told you who you needed to be? Who were you before? So getting
Mm-hmm.
people to kind of go back and to quite literally remember and put back together those parts of themselves that can feel fragmented, but are actually always with them and always have been and have never left them, and getting them to kind of go back and to remember. And then from the spiritual, framework, getting them to go back and remember what was the trust, the amana, the promise, the commitment that your soul made, an agreement before you came to this place. And then when you came to this place again and again and again. So even remembering, that commitment, so much of what she's asking in this is connected to all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And remembering that you chose the ethnic group you would be a part of. You chose the family you would be a part of. You chose the different attributes and temperament that you would have. You chose and you said yes. So getting, us to remember the soul and the sanctity of it, and that beautiful sacred promise. And then, kind of peeling back the onion, right? The layers of the onion to then remember that childlike self that remembers distinctly, what did you spend the most time doing?
Mm-hmm.
you know,
I think one of the things I'm in healthcare, so I'm a nurse practitioner in primary care and emergency. So I've got my own family practice and I run a couple of clinics here in Canada. And I think COVID taught people a lot. There was a lot of good that came out of COVID. uh I saw things in the hospital. I was in the hospitals on the front lines of everything. So, but a lot of good came out of COVID. I think what people looked at, I mean, I don't know what happened in the States. Well, I do know, I kind of know what happened in the States because we kind of looked at you guys. But I think one of the things that um, I learned, or what I saw from people was, when Justin Trudeau, the prime minister at the time, said, okay, everyone's got to be working from home and everyone's got to keep their butts at home, people started to realize what life was about. They were at home, they didn't have to travel 2 hours to work. They weren't, they were saving money on gas, they were saving money on bus fare, but from not from a financial perspective, but also they realized, man, I actually drove 2 hours to work, or it took me 3 hours every day. And realizing, you know what, I'm at home, I'm eating okay, I'm eating a lot better, I'm sleeping better. Work productivity statistically in most workplace settings improved dramatically because people were actually like, I'm at home, okay, I'll do it. But their work life balance was a lot better. And I think that's when the exodus started, where people started to leave their workplaces and say, I need to balance my life. And I think that's when you start to see people sort of doing things for themselves from a creative perspective, from a workplace perspective. But I think people were trying to lead a life of contentment. That, yeah, I've had CEOs, I've had everybody in my office cry, I can't do this, Gazala. And then, when I take them out of work, they come back 3, 4 weeks later, totally different person I can see. But some of them left these high paying jobs and went into construction, or they're just like, I'm happy. Like, I don't need to do all this stuff. Some of them went into creative realms. So I think there's a lot that people today are looking at. And it's nice to see the younger generation. I mean, they're a very different generation, but they're also more tapped into that a little bit more. That I'm noticing. I know my daughter is, she's 19. My son is 23, two very different people, but still, I think there's something to be said for that. So I think this is a learning for everybody, adults and younger people alike, for sure.
I couldn't agree more. I think that was such a, you know, um, learning curve, honestly, all over the country. And
Mhm.
similarly, I have been homeschooling for 12 years and have been doing homeschool and educator consultations and workshops and other, offerings for the community. And that was like the biggest time during COVID where I had so many families reaching out, just like, how do I spend this time? How do I, teach my child and work? How do you do this? How can I sort of reevaluate my priorities? And time again, what I would remind people is that you're not really replicating what's happening in the public school. What you really want to do is sit down and look into the eyes of your family members, and sit down and look in the mirror at yourself and ask yourself kind of that same question, like, what brings me alive? What brings each of these people alive? And really dig deep to think about, like, who are each of us, and what, and then from that comes a lot of the natural areas of creativity. And then you can teach better and parent better from that place, because to be able to be with your children, one of the ways to do that with more ease and comfort is to remember what it was like to be a child. So it's like you have to kind of go back and ask yourself, what was it like for me to be a child? What did I need it to be like? What did I want it to be like? And then asking those same questions of your children and really kind of spending time observing them, to help to remember and kind of drudge up those creative aspects of ourselves. And then you can kind of unfold and go forward and say, okay, this is how I lead best in my family. This is how my partner leads best in our family. I'm able to lead from this creative place. These are the ways that my children learn best and receive best when they're able to center into their most creative, authentic selves. And then it's like a whole new world unravels, and families can really transform and then begin to thrive in a different way, that isn't rooted in so much of a robotic, sometimes kind of automated and exhausted place, but really from a full place, and that you're pouring and you're giving from this place that's already really full and rich. So yeah, what you were sharing, with your patients, of even just giving them that time off and then seeing how they come back, transformed. It's really beautiful to see that in all of the different, professions and different communities and realms that we are able to engage with and be a part of. So it's really beautiful. Nora, I'm so curious also because when Ghazala is speaking about like the younger generation, I feel like you're a part of that generation. So I would love to hear from your perspective before we kind of transition to our week 7 reading. What are some of the things that you're experiencing, maybe personally, or what are some of the things that you're witnessing, from your peers?
I was actually going to talk about this. Gonzalo, you reminded me of something, and I was like, okay, that's crazy. Um, in my morning pages, this the same kind of like theme comes about. Like, I'm really asking myself, like, when did I feel when was my creativity, like, when did that blockage start, and like when did it like begin, and what caused, like, when I was all these, like, when did that begin essentially, and when did I feel like it wasn't safe to be creative anymore? And I think all these memories started to pop up essentially, and I started writing about it, and I started thinking about when I was a kid. There has been moments in my childhood when I used to write as young as like 10 years old, 9 years old, like as young as 9. That's when I would write. I used to have a journal, and this journal that I had, I would like that was the I grew up as a very quiet kid when I was a child. Didn't really say much to anybody, was very shy, didn't bother anybody. I could really come to myself. And because of that, I never expressed myself, right? The only place I felt safe enough to express myself is in my journal, right? And there has been 2 instances when I was a kid when the journals that I would have would essentially be used against me. One time was when I was 9, and I would write about how I had a crush on another kid in my class, and this random girl in my class took my journal from my desk, showed it to my teacher, and my teacher told my mom. You know what I'm saying? I was 9 at the time. Another time was when I was 12, and I used to write stories. I wrote a story about an adopted girl who was possessed by jinns, and that time as well, with that time, it was used against me as well, when a random girl in my class read my journal and read the story and suddenly thought the story was about her. So then she started bullying me in class, and it was in Dixie. It was in Islamic school. And I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. And mind you, I was a kid. And I was a very quiet kid. I didn't do anything to anybody. And because my journal was the safest place I had to express myself, and those spaces were always encroached upon by others. I was like, wow, that's insane. The fact that it even happened in the first place, and why I feel like the reason now I feel like one of the reasons why I don't feel like I can be vulnerable, or I can open up, or I can go dig deeper, is because all the times that I did or it was violated. You know what I'm saying? So it made me really think about that as well. And then a lot of stuff has been opening up as well about, like, perfectionism, as well as like, and not feeling like everything has to be exactly right, or being able to live in like perfectionism, or living in the messiness when you are creating and stuff like that, or not realizing that, like, your bad drafts may look like a masterpiece to someone else. Does that make sense? Your messy draft may seem like a masterpiece to someone else. So I'm like thinking to myself, like, art is subjective. People can see it however, interpretation wise, whatever. And I remember I was painting this one time, and it was free painting. And what I painted essentially was this random thing. I didn't know what the fuck I painted. But people were like, Picasso, look at you, Picasso. And I'm like, like I said, art is up to interpretation is relative. So, like I said before, your messy draft may seem like a masterpiece to someone else, and being okay with knowing whatever is created, um, it's up to Allah how someone sees it, you know. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But
Oh,
I think the morning pages, one of the things that I think she really specifies is that just start writing. Like write the first things that come to your head. And then one of the things she says, there's another book she writes in, it's called Write for Life. And it's a good book as well. But what she says in that book too, which is similar to what she says here, is just start writing. And then all of a sudden, your squiggly lines of like maybe 2 or 3 words or a few become longer and longer. So I think I think what I think what people have to do as yourself as well is trust in the process. And I think trust in understanding that, listen, whatever happens, happens, and I'm going to see where this goes. That's how people get inspired, and that's where creativity and some brilliant things have come about. So I think the key thing is exactly what you said, shutting those sensors out, whether they be your own sensor, other people censoring you out. You do what makes you feel fine, right? I think that's important. I think that's something we definitely need to enrich with people is, to be creative does not mean that you're going to actually produce a piece that people think, oh, well, if you're going to be creative, you're going to just be this brilliant artist. It's called learning. We're all learning the same, just like you learned a profession. It's the same thing with creativity. Thank you for sharing that story, though.
yeah, it's rough out here. I think about a lot about how the stuff that I went through as a kid was just people punishing. Like I was a young black girl in like post 9/11 America, so you can imagine the shit that happened. But anyways, to each their own.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think also too, you know, it reminds us to come back to the pen, the power of the pen and writing our stories, writing our perspectives, just writing what is happening inside of ourselves, that in and of itself can lead us down a path and a journey. And also too, that we start to notice, like, I don't know if you've ever looked back at different journals at different, ages and different times in your life, but you can pick up on patterns, throughout your life that can help to piece this puzzle of your life together, and make things more clear and can give you a certain level of certainty, which I think kind of touches on, as we're kind of transitioning into week 7, this recovering the sense of connection with ourselves, and our creativity and everything that is happening inside of us and around us. So paying attention to those patterns, of our life and our story and going back. That's one thing that I really have always loved about journaling is I have been a strong, avid journaler since I was a child. I have every single cringy journey from childhood all the way to present day. And it's nice to be able to go back and to see the evolution and to see the story and to see the consistency in certain areas. Like, what are the constants in our lives? What are the things that have always remained, with us? What are the things that have remained with us, but maybe slightly changed in some ways over time? Or what are the things that are just completely different? And how is that in relation to our creative process and our path and even the craft itself? So this is some really rich and beautiful discussion. And I think it's a really beautiful segue into our week 7, recovering a sense of connection. So what we can do here is we can start reading and then we'll take our prayer pause because Maghrib comes in at about 7:57-ish, so almost 8 o'clock. But we can read for the next 15 minutes and then pause at 8 for 10 minutes and then come back. How are folks feeling about that?
Sounds good.
Awesome.
I
Okay, great.
can read if you want.
Yeah, let's do that. And then when you're kind of like, you get to a point where you want to pause or something, then you can pause wherever you like and we can popcorn style it. Or if you really enjoy reading, you can just read through week 7 and we'll, pause when we get to week 8.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay, so Bismillah, recovering a sense of connection. Listening, which is something we don't do well. I will tell you this. The ability to listen is a skill. Absolutely. We are honing both our morning pages and our artist dates. The pages train us to hear past our sensor. The artist dates helps us to pick up the voice of inspiration. While both of these activities are apparently unconnected to the actual act of making art, they are critical to the creative process. Art is not about thinking something up. It is about the opposite, getting something down. The directions are important here. Nura, that's a good point for you, just from what you're talking about. If we are trying to think something up, we are straining to reach for something that's just beyond our grasp, up there in the stratosphere where art lives on high. When we get something down, there is no strain. We're not doing, we're getting. Someone or something else is doing the doing. Instead of reaching for inventions, we are engaged in listening. When an actor is in the moment, he or she is engaged in listening to the next right thing creatively. When a painter is painting, he or she may begin with a plan, but that plan is soon surrendered to the painting's own plan. This is often expressed as the brush takes the next stroke. In dance, in composition, in sculpture, the experience is the same. We are more the conduit than the creator of what we express. Art is the act of tuning in and dropping down the well. It is as though all the stories, painting, music, performances in the world just live under the surface of our normal consciousness. Like an underground river, they flow through as a stream of ideas that we can tap down into. As artists, we drop down the well into the stream. We hear what's down there, we act on it, more like taking dictation than anything fancy having to do with art. A friend of mine is a superb film director who is known for his meticulous planning, and yet he often shoots most brilliantly from the seat of his pants, quickly grabbing a shot that comes to him as he works. These moments of clear inspiration require that we move into them on faith. We can practice these small leaps of faith daily in our pages and on our artist dates. We can learn not only to listen, but also to hear with increasing accuracy that inspired intuitive voice that says, do this, try this, say this. Most writers have had the experience of catching a poem or a paragraph or two of formed writing. We consider these finds to be small miracles. What we fail to realize is that they are, in fact, the norm. We are the instrument more than the author of our work. Michelangelo is said to have remarked that he released David from the marble block he found him in. The painting has a life of its own. I tried to let it come through. And Jackson Pollock. When I teach screenwriting, I remind my students that their movie already exists in its entirety. Their job is to listen for it, watch it with their mind's eye, and write it down. The same may be said of all art. If painting and sculptures wait for us, then sonatas wait for us. Books, plays, and poems wait for us too. Our job is simply to get them down. To do that, we drop down the well. Some people find it easier to picture the stream of inspiration as being like radio waves of all sorts being broadcast at times. With practice, we learn to hear the desired frequency on request. We tune into the frequency we want. Like a parent, we learn to hear the voice of our current brainchild among the other children's voices. Once you accept that it's natural to create, you can begin to accept a second idea that the creator will hand you whatever you need for the project. The minute you are willing to accept the help of this collaborator, you will see full useful bits of help everywhere in your life. Be alert. There is a second voice, a higher harmonic adding to and augmenting your inner creative voice. This voice frequently shows itself in synchronicity. You will hear the dialogue you need, find the right song for the sequence, see the exact paint color you almost had in mind, and so forth. You will have the experience of finding things, books, seminars, tossed out stuff that happen to fit with what you are doing. Learn to accept the possibility that the universe is helping you with what you are doing. Become willing to see the hand of God and accept it as your friends offer to help with what you are doing. Because many of us unconsciously harbor the fearful belief that God will find our creations decadent and frivolous or worse. We tend to discount this creator to creator help. Try to remember that God is the great artist. Artists like other artists. Expect the universe to support your dream. It will. Something to add here is creativity and inspiration can come at any point. So sometimes when you're at work, I find keeping a book beside you, if things come to you, start writing it down. That's something that's sort of is a message in what is being written here. Perfectionism. Nura, this is for you. Tilly Osmond correctly calls it the knife of the perfectionist attitude in art. You might call it something else, getting it right, you may call it, or fixing it before I go any further. You may call it having standards. What you should be calling it is perfectionism. Perfectionism has nothing to do with getting it right. It has nothing to do with fixing things. It has nothing to do with standards. Perfectionism is a refusal to let yourself move ahead. It is a loop, an obsessive, debilitating closed system that causes you to get stuck in the details of what you are writing or painting or making and to lose sight of the whole. Instead of creating freely and allowing errors to reveal themselves later as insights, we often get mired in getting the details right. We correct our originality into uniformity that lacks passion and spontaneity. Do not fear mistakes, Miles Davis told us. There are none. The perfectionist fixes one line of a poem over and over until no lines are right. The perfectionist redraws the chin line on a portrait until the paper tears. The perfectionist writes so many versions of a scene one that she never gets to the rest of the play. The perfectionist writes, paints, creates with one eye on her audience. Instead of enjoying the process, the perfectionist is constantly grading the results. That's a really important paragraph. The perfectionist has married the logic side of the brain. The critique reigns supreme in the perfectionist creative household. A brilliant descriptive prose passage is critiqued with a white glove approach. What about this comma? Is this how you spell? For the perfectionist, there are no first drafts, rough sketches, warm-up sketches, exercises. Every draft is meant to be final, perfect, set in tone. Midway through a project, the perfectionist decides to read it all over, outline it, see where it's going. And where is it going? Nowhere very fast. The perfectionist is never satisfied. The perfectionist never says, this is pretty good. I think I'll just keep going. To the perfectionist, there is always room for improvement. The perfectionist always calls this humility. In reality, it is egotism. That's a good point. It is pride that makes you want to write a perfect script, paint a perfect painting, perform a perfect audition monologue. Perfectionism is not a quest for the best. It is the pursuit of the worst in ourselves, the part that tells us that nothing we do will ever be good enough, that we should try again. No, we should not. A painting is never finished. It simply stops in interesting places, said Paul Gardner. A book is never finished, but at a certain point, you stop writing it and go on to the next thing. A film is never cut perfectly, but at a certain point, you let it go and call it done. This is the normal part of creativity, letting go. We always do the best we can by the light we have to see by. Risk. What do I do if I have to do it perfectly? The answer is a great deal more than I am. We've all heard that the unexamined life is not worth living, but consider too that the unlived life is not worth examining. The success of a creative recovery hinges on our ability to move out of the head and into action. This brings us squarely to risk. Most of us are practiced at talking ourselves out of risk. We are skilled spectaculars on the probable pain of self-exposure. I'll look like an idiot, we say, conjuring images of our first acting class, our first hobbled short story, our terrible drawings. Part of the game here is lining up the masters and measuring our baby steps against their perfected craft. We don't compare our student films to George Lucas's student films. Instead, we compare them to Star Wars. We deny that in order to do something well, we must first be willing to do it badly. Instead, we opt for setting our limits at a point where we feel assured of success. Living within these bounds, we may feel stifled, smothered, despairing, and bored. But yes, we do feel safe, and safety is a very expensive illusion. In order to risk, we must jettison our accepted limits. We must break through I can't because I'm too old, too broke, too shy, too proud, self-defended, timorous. Usually what we say we can't do something, what we mean is that we won't do something unless we can guarantee that we will do it perfectly. Working artists know the folly of this stance. There is a common joke among directors. Oh yeah, I always know exactly how I should direct the picture after I'm done directing it. As a blocked artist, we unrealistically expect and demand success for ourselves and recognition of the success from others. What that is, What that, as an unspoken demand, a great many things remain outside our sphere of possibility. As actors, we tend to allow ourselves to be typecast rather than working to expand our range. As singers, we stay married to our safe material. As songwriters, we try to repeat a formula hit. In this way, artists who do not appear blocked to the outside experience themselves as blocked internally, unable to take the risk of moving into new and more satisfying artistic territory. Once we're willing to accept that anything worth doing might even be worth doing badly, our options widen. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, I would try. And you can read that list from 1 to 20. And the moving rate,
Do you want me to take over
I
for
can keep
Lalo?
going. I can keep
Okay.
going. We're
Okay.
almost kind of done this, so it's not bad. In the
Okay.
movie Raging Bull, boxer Jake LaMotta's manager, that's a really good movie, by the way, manager brother explains to him why he should shed some weight and fight an unknown opponent. After an intricate spiel that leaves LaMotta baffled, he concludes, so do it. If you win, you win. If you lose, you win. It is always that way of taking risks. To put it differently, very often a risk is worth taking simply for the sake of taking it. There is something in living and leavening about expanding our self definition, and at risk does exactly that. Selecting a challenge and meeting it creates a sense of self empowerment that becomes the ground for further successful challenges. Viewed this way, running a marathon increases your chances of writing a full length play. Writing a full length play gives you a leg up on the marathon. Complete the following sentence: if I didn't have to do it perfectly, I would try. Jealousy. Jealousy, I've often heard, is a normal human emotion. When I hear it, I think maybe your jealousy, not mine. My jealousy roars in my head, tightens the chest, massages my stomach lining with a cold fist as it searches out the best grip. I've long regarded jealousy as my greatest weakness. Only recently have I seen it for the toughest love friend that it is. And Islamically, it's one of the worst things that you should have and something that to clear your heart from. Jealousy is a map. Each of our jealousy maps differ. Each of us will probably be surprised by some of the things we discover on our own. I, for example, have never um, been eaten alive with resentment over the success of women novelists, but an unhealthy interest. I took an unhealthy interest in the fortunes and misfortunes of women playwrights. I was their harshest critic until I wrote my first play. With that action, my jealousy vanished, replaced by a feeling of camaraderie. My jealousy had actually made a mask for my fear of doing something I really wanted to do, but was not yet brave enough to take action toward. Jealousy is always a mask for fear that we aren't able to get what we want, frustration that somebody else seems to be getting what is rightfully ours, even if we are too frightened to reach for it. At its root, jealousy is a stingy emotion. It doesn't allow for the abundance and multiplicity of the universe. Jealousy tells us there is room for one poet, one painter, one whatever you dream of being. The truth revealed by action, the direction of our dreams is that there is room for all of us. But jealousy produces tunnel vision. It narrows our ability to see things in perspective. It strips us of our ability to see other options. The biggest lie that jealousy tells us is that we have no choice but to be jealous. Perversely, jealousy strips us of our will to act when action holds the key to our freedom. Your jealousy map. So there's an exercise. So I should stop right here then because we have a couple of exercises here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that sound good, Jamina? Or
Yeah, that's great. And when we come back from prayer break, I would love for us to spend a little bit of time because I know we're going to go into our creative writing segment. But I would love to spend a little bit of time exploring that section on perfectionism because you had paused, Gonzalo, when you were reading and you were like, oh, that's really good, that's important, that's really good. So maybe us spending a little bit of time, maybe do like a brief share out when we come back on that part, and then we can get into writing.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, I think this is a good place for us to pause, and
Okay.
we'll come back at 8:10, so 10 after.
Sounds
okay,
good.
All
okay.
right. Peace.
I like them.
Okay, Bismillah, welcome back. So, where we left off was with this question that was kind of bubbling around the topic of perfectionism. And so I think that this would be a really good place for us if each, person can share, even if it's just one word, you could drop it in the chat. One word either out loud or in the chat that kind of sparked, your interest when you thought about this section around perfectionism. So it could be like one word that resembles a memory that you had, or it could be one word that feels present with you now in relation to perfectionism. And so you can share that either in the chat in one word or you can share it out loud. And then we will go into some creative writing for about 10 minutes, and I will put on some relaxing sounds for us to do some writing too. Yeah, anxiety. Yep.
Mine is when she said, and I have it up too. What did she say? The perfectionist calls this humility. In reality, is egotism. It is pride that makes us want to write the perfect script, paint the perfect picture, perform the perfect audition monologue. Perfectionism isn't a quest for the best, it is the pursuit of the worst in ourselves, a part that tells us that nothing we do will ever be good enough and that we should try again. That feels like a call out, okay? I'm sorry. It feels like, legit feels like she's calling me out. Like, what the fuck? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. That part, the first time that I read it was like, yep, that is so real, that it can keep us stagnant and self-righteous, while masked as humility. My word would be farewell, because I think that perfectionism for me feels so, it's like something that I've gotten to say farewell to, kind of, acknowledge that part of my journey and to be able to see it from a much more distant place, but still acknowledging and recognizing the part that it's played in my journey, but being able to kind of wave at it, from a distance and like, farewell, like I see you. But, there's no present day home for you here. All right. So with that, let's get into our creative writing for 10 minutes for week 7. And then we will come back and read week 8.
Okay, sounds good.
So we are at week 8, recovering a sense of strength. And I will start us off with the reading and then I'll pause if someone would like to jump in. All right, bismillah. Recovering a sense of strength. So on the side it says, this week tackles another major creative block, time. You will explore the ways in which you have used your perception of time to preclude taking creative risk. You will identify immediate and practical changes you can make in your current life. You will excavate the early conditioning that may have encouraged you to settle for far less than you desire creatively. Survival. One of the most difficult tasks an artist must face is a primal one, artistic survival. All artists must learn the art of surviving loss, loss of hope, loss of faith, loss of money, loss of self-belief. In addition to our many gains, we inevitably suffer these losses in an artistic career. They are the hazards of the road, and in many ways, its signpost. Artistic losses can be turned into artistic gains and strengths, but not in the isolation of the beleaguered artist's brain. As mental health experts are quick to point out, in order to move through loss and beyond it, we must acknowledge it and share it. Because artistic losses are seldom openly acknowledged or mourned, they become artistic scar tissue that blocks artistic growth. Deemed too painful, too silly, too humiliating to share, and so to heal, they become instead secret losses. If artistic creations are our brain children, artistic losses are our miscarriages. Women often suffer terribly and privately from losing a child who doesn't come to term. And as artists, we suffer terrible losses when the book doesn't sell. The film doesn't get picked up, the juried show doesn't take our paintings, the best pot shatters, the poems are not accepted, the ankle injury sidelines us for an entire dance season. We must remember that our artist is a child and that what we can handle intellectually far outstrips what we can handle emotionally. We must be alert to flag and mourn our losses. The disappointing reception of a good piece of work, the inability to move across into a different medium or type of role due to other people's expectations of us, are artistic losses that must be mourned. It is no good to say, oh, it happens to everybody, or who was I kidding anyway? The unmourned disappointment becomes the barrier that separates us from future dreams. Not being cast in the role that's yours, not being asked to join the company, having the show canceled or the play unreviewed, these are all losses. Perhaps the most damaging form of artistic loss has to do with criticism. The artist within, like the child within, is seldom hurt by truth. It will say again that much true criticism liberates the artist it is aimed at. We are childlike, not childish. Aha! It is often the accompanying inner sound when a well-placed, accurate, critical arrow makes its mark. The artist thinks, yes, I can see that. That's right. I can change that. The criticism that damages an artist is the criticism, well-intentioned or ill, that contains no saving kernel of truth, yet has a certain damning plausibility or an unassailable blanket judgment that cannot be rationally refuted. Teachers, editors, mentors are often authority figures or parent figures for a young artist. There is a sacred trust inherent in the bond between teacher and student. This trust, when violated, has the impact of a parental violation. What we are talking about here is emotional incest. A trusting student hears from an unscrupulous teacher that good work is bad or lacks promise, or that he, the guru teacher, senses a limit to the student's real talent, or was mistaken in seeing talent, or doubts that there is talent. Personal in nature, nebulous as to specifics, this criticism is like covert sexual harassment, a sullying yet hard to quantify experience. The student emerges shamed, feeling like a bad artist or worse, a fool to try. I'll pass the reading off to whomever would like to pick up the section on the ivory power.
I can go next.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nora.
What does she mean by this? Okay, never mind. Um, it has been my perilous privilege over the past decade to undertake teaching forays into the groves of academia. It is my experience as a visiting artist that many academics are themselves artistic beings who are deeply frustrated by their inability to create, skilled in intellectual discourse, distanced by that intellectual skills from their own creative urgings. They often find the creativity of their charges deeply disturbing. Devoted as they are to the scholarly appreciation of art, most academics find the beast intimidating when viewed firsthand. Creative writing programs tend to be regarded with justified suspicion. Those people aren't studying creativity. They were actually practicing it. Who knows where this could lead? I am thinking particularly of a film department chair of my acquaintance, a gifted filmmaker who for many years had been unable or unwilling to expose himself to the rigors and the disappointments of creating. Channeling his ferocious creative urges into the lives of his students, he alternatively over-controlled and undercut their best endeavors, seeking to vicariously fulfill or justify his own position on the sidelines. As much as I wanted to dislike this man, and I certainly disliked his behavior, I found myself unable to regard him without compassion. His own thwarted creativity, so luminous in his early films, has darkened to shadow first his own life, then the lives of his students. In the truest sense, he was a creative monster. Okay. It took years and more teachings for me to realize that academia harbors a far more subtle, deadly foe to the creative spirit. All right hostility, after all, can be accompanied, unencumbered, uncountered, far more dangerous, far more soul-chilling in the subtle discounting that may numb students' creativity in the academic grove. I am thinking now of my time as a distinguished researcher at university, where my teaching colleagues published widely and well on film topics of the most esoteric and exotic stripe, highly regarded among their intellectual peers. Deeply immersed in their own academic careers, these colleagues have these colleagues offer scant minimum to creative students who pass through their tutelage. They neglected to supply that most rudimentary nutrient, encouragement. Creativity cannot be comfortably quantified in intellectual terms. It by its very nature, creativity eschews such containment. In a university where the intellectual life is built upon the art of criticizing, on deconstructing a creative work, the art of creation itself, the act of creative construction meets with an scanty support, understanding, or approval. To be blunt, most academics know how to take something apart, but not to assemble it, but not how to assemble it. Student work, once scrutinized, was seldom appreciated. Far from it, whatever its genuine accomplishment, it was viewed solely in the terms of its shortfalls. Time and again, I saw promising work met with volley of should have done, could have done, might have done, instead of being worked as it was. It is not my argument that the world of academia be turned into an exalted artist studio. It is, however, my point that artists attempting to exist, grow, even flourish. Within the milieu, you recognize that the entire thrust of intellectualism runs counter to the creative impulse. For an artist to become overly cerebral is to become crippled. This is not to say artists lack rigor. Rather, artistic rigor is grounded differently than intellectual life usually admits. Okay, you want to go next, Gazala? Do you hear me?
Sure, no problem.
Okay.
Okay, so artists and intellectuals are not the same animal. As a younger artist, this was very confusing to me. I myself have considerable critical gifts and have, in fact, won national awards for practicing them. It was to my own rue that I discovered that these same skills were misapplied when focused on embryonic artistic endeavors, mine or others. Younger artists are seedlings. Their early work resembles thicket and underbrush, even weeds. The hall of academia, with their preference for lofty intellectual theorems, do little to support the lift of forest floor. As a teacher, it has been my sad experience that many talented creatives were daunted early and unfairly by their inability to conform to a norm that was not their own. It would be my hope that the academics who read this book and apply it uh, to apply it would do so with an altered appreciation for the authenticity of growth for the sake of growth. In other words, a taller tree, let us not allow our darker critical powers unfettered play upon the seedling artist in our midst. Without specific tools and sufficient ego strength, many gifted artists languish for years in the wake of such blows. Shamed at their supposed lack of talent, shamed by their grandiose dreams, the young artists may channel their gifts into commercial endeavors and then forget their dreams of doing more groundbreaking and risky work. They may work as editors instead of writers, film editors instead of film directors, commercial artists instead of fine artists, and get stuck within shouting distance of their dreams. The audacity, not authentic talent, confers fame on an artist. The lack of audacity, pinched out by critical abuse or malnourished through neglect, may cripple many artists far superior to those we publicly acclaim. In order to recover a sense of hope and the courage to create, we must acknowledge and mourn the scars that are blocking us. This process may seem both painstaking and petty, but it is necessary rite of passage. Just as a teenager must gain autonomy from an overbearing parent, so too an artist must gain autonomy from malignant artist mentors. When Ten finished writing his first novel, he bravely sent it off to a literary agent. He also sent a check for $100 to pay the agent for taking the time and trouble to read it. What came back was a single page of unusable, irresponsible, and vague reaction. This novel is half good and half bad. That's the worst kind. I can't tell you how to fix it. I suggest pitching it out. When I met Ted, excuse me, he had been blocked for 7 years. Like many beginners, he hadn't even known to get another opinion. It was with great difficulty that he handed his novel over to me. As Ted's friend, I was heartbroken for him that this novel had been manhandled. As a professional, I was impressed. So impressed, I found myself with my first student to unblock. Please try to write again. You can do it. I know you can do it. I started in. Ted was willing to risk unblocking. It is now 12 years since Ted began his work with the Morning Pages. He has written 3 novels, 2 movies. He is an impressive literary agent and a growing reputation. In order to get where he is now, Ted has to refeel and mourn the wounding he has endured as a young writer. He had to make his peace with the lost years this wounding had cost him. Nora, that's you. At a page, a day at a time, he had slowly built strength. Like the career of any athlete, an artist's life will have injuries. They go with the game. The trick is to survive them, to learn to let yourself heal from them. Just as a player who ignores a sore muscle may tear it further, an artist who buries his pain over losses will ultimately cripple himself into silence. Give yourself the dignity of admitting your artistic wounds. This is the first step in healing them. No inventory of our artistic injuries would be complete without acknowledging those wounds that are self-inflicted. Many times as artists, we are offered a chance that we balk at, sabotaged by our fear, our low self-worth, or simply our other agendas. Grace is offered in art scholarship in another city, but doesn't want to leave Jerry, her boyfriend. She turns the scholarship down. Jack is offered a dream job in his field in a faraway city. It's a great job, but he turns it down because all the friends and family he has where he is. Angela gets terrible reviews in a terrible play, and is then offered another lead in a challenging play. She turns it down. Though these lost chances often haunt us bitterly in later years. We will work more extensively later with our artistic U-turns, but for now, just counting them as losses begins a process of healing them. Keep going. This is a long one.
I can continue.
Okay.
Art is an act of structuring time. Look at it this way. A piece of art stays. Here's how I see it. As my waggish friend, the novelist Eve Babbitt remarks, it's all in the frame. This is particularly true when what we are dealing with is an artistic loss. Every loss must always be viewed as a potential gain. It's all in the framing. Every end is a beginning, we know that, but we tend to forget as we move through grief struck by a loss, we focus understandably on what we leave behind. The lost dream of the work's successful fruition and its buoyant reception. We need to focus on what lies ahead. This can be tricky. We maybe not know what lies ahead, and if the present hurts us badly, we tend to view the future as an impending pain. Gain disguised as loss is a potent artist tool. To acquire it, simply brutally ask, how can this loss serve me? Where does it point my work? The answer will surprise and liberate you. The trick is to metabolize pain as energy. The key to doing that is to know, to trust, to act as if a silver lining exists if you are only willing to look at the work differently, or to walk through the different door, one that you may have balked at. In order to catch the ball, you have to wait to catch the ball. The film director George Kasevitz once told a young director, "Hearing this, took it to mean, stop complaining about the lousy curves you get thrown and stretch. Reach for what you really want." I have tried to follow this advice. For years, I have played studio roulette. Repeatedly, original scripts were bought and not made. Repeatedly, finding work language on studio shelves, the victim of revolving studios' doors. Gold pictures became dead overnight, except in my filmmaker's heart, which was breaking. This is just the way it is, I was told repeatedly. If you want to see your films made, you must first sell yourself as a writer. And if one of your scripts is made, if that film is a hit, and if the client warms up a little, then you might get a shot at directing. I listened to this conventional wisdom for a long time, racking up loss after loss, writing script after script. Finally, after one loss, too many, I began to look for another door, the one I had refused to walk through. I tried to catch the ball. I became an independent filmmaker. I left Hollywood, went to Chicago, bought a used camera, and using my Miami Vice writing memory, Shot my own feature, romantic 40s style comedy. It was in the can for 31,000 and it looked good. Then incredibly, my second tapes are stolen. I finished the film anyway, dubbing it in its entirety. Yes, crazy, but so was Cassettes, my role model. The result won foreign distribution and fine reviews abroad, and I learned a lot because I asked how instead of why me. I now have a modest first feature to my credit. It might have happened if I had not taken matters into my own hands, but it might not have either. Since 1974, I have worked rigorously and exhaustively as a film writer. I have written and sold features, short film documentaries, docudramas, teleplays, movies of the week, and the bastardized movies, the miniseries. I have directed one feature and a half dozen short films. Less visibly, I have labored as a script doctor, credited and not for hire and for love. To boot, I have written 100+ film essays, film interviews, think pieces, trend pieces, aesthetic pieces, and more. All as I toiled as a writer for such diverse publications as Rolling Stone, New York Times, Village Voice, New York, New York, New Stone, and New York Times, New West, and Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, and more. Conspicuously American film, where I served as a contributing editor for many years. In short, you might say I have done my dharma to my favorite art form. Why all of these diverse Hydra-headed productivity? Because I love movies, love making them, and I did not want to take my loss to take me down. I learned when hit by a loss to ask the right question, what next, instead of why me. Whenever I'm willing to ask what is necessary next, I have moved ahead. Whenever I have taken no for a final answer, I have stalled and gotten stuck. I have learned that the key to career resiliency is self-improvement, self-empowerment, and choice. If you look at long, successful creative careers, you'll see the principle in action. The distinguished videographer Shirley Clark began her creative career as a dancer. She first became a filmmaker so that there'd be some properly made dance film, distinguishing herself next as a first-rate feature director, winning renown in Europe, if not directing jobs in American studios. Clark became the first American director to shoot a feature in Holland, the first American director to explore the range of handheld cameras, the American director that John Cassavetes, Martin Scorsese, and Paul Schrader all credit as seminal in their own artistic formations. Alas, she was a woman and she lived in the difficult times. When her filmmaking revenues dried up, she became one of the first video artists working with Sam Shepard, Joseph Papp, Ornette Coleman, and Clark clearly took to heart the idea that it was harder to hit a moving target. Whenever one avenue for her creativity was blocked, she found another. Film and novels abound with such stories. Eliza Kazan, out of favor as a director, wrote novels. The director, John Cassavetes, also a fine actor, used his acting to fund his directing efforts, which was too eclectic for studio backing. If they won't make they won't make it as future, I'll make it, Cassavetes said, and he did. Rather than allow himself to be blocked, he looked for another door. He would enjoy the wonderful series Fairytale Theater if actress producer Shelley Duvall had stayed home complaining during acting droughts instead of turning her creativity elsewhere. Non-illimity to Gardener. As I say, the graffiti in prisoner of war camps said to have run. The rough translation, very important for artists, is don't let the bastard get you down. Artists who take this to heart survive, often prevail. The key here is action. Pain is not used profitably quickly, solidifies into that lead in heart, which makes any action difficult. When faced with loss, immediately take one small action to support your artist. Even if all you're doing is buying a bunch of tulips and a sketch pad, your action says, I acknowledge you and your pain. I promise you a future worth having. Like a small child, our artist needs mommy. Ouch, that hurt. Here's a little treat, little bite, I promise. I promise. I have a director friend who tells me that on his worst nights when he is about to open a new film and he waits career catastrophe, sure he will never work again in the dark alone. He cajoles himself to sleep. If I can't shoot 35 millimeter, if I could still shoot 60 millimeter. If I can't shoot 60 millimeter, then I can shoot a video. If I can't shoot video, I can shoot Super 8. Okay, someone else want to take this? Can you guys hear me?
Oh yeah, I can do it. Hang on, word. Okay. Age and time, product and process. Question, do you know how old I'll be by the time I learn to play the piano? Answer, the same age you will be if you don't. I'm too old for that, ranks with I don't have money for it as a great block lie we use to prevent further exploration. I'm too old is something we tell ourselves to save ourselves from the emotional cost of the ego deflation involved in being a beginner. I'm too old to go to film school. I told myself at 35, and when I got to film school, I discovered that I was indeed 15 years older than my classmates. I also discovered I had a great creative hunger, more life experience, and a much stronger learning curve. Now that I've taught in a film school myself, I find that very often my best students are those who came to their work late. I'm too old to be an actor. I've heard many students complain, and dramatically, I might add. They are not always pleased when I tell them that this is not the case. The splendid actor John Mahoney did not began acting until he was nearly 40. 10 years into a highly successful career, he's now often booked 3 films in advance and works with some of the finest directors in the world. I'm too old to be ready to really be a writer is another frequent comment. This is more ego saving nonsense. Raymond Chandler didn't publish until the far side of 40. The superb novel Jules and Jim was written as a first novel by a man in his 70s. I'm too old is an evasive tactic. It is always used to avoid facing fear. Now let's look at the other side. I'll tell myself, I'll try it when I'm retired. This is an interesting side trip on the same ego saving track. As a culture, we glorify youth and allow our youth the freedom to experiment, and we disparage our old timers but allow them the right to be a little crazy. Many blocked creatives tell themselves that they are both too old or too young to allow themselves to pursue their dreams. Old and dotty, they might try it. Young and foolish, they might try it. In either scenario, being crazy is a prerequisite to creative exploration. We do not want to look crazy and try something like that at our age, whatever it would look nuts. Yes, maybe. Creativity occurs in the moment, and in the moment, we are timeless. We discovered that as we engage in a creative recovery, I felt like a kid, we might say, after a satisfying artist date. Kids are not self conscious, and once we're actually in the flow of our creativity, neither are we. How long will it take me to learn to do that? We may ask, standing in the sideline of a longed for activity. Maybe a year to be pretty good. It depends. As blocked creatives, as we like to pretend that a year or even several years is a long, long time. Our ego plays this little trick to keep us from getting started. Instead of allowing ourselves a creative journey, we focus on the length of the trip. It's such a long way, we tell ourselves. It may be, but each day is just one more day with some motion in it. And that motion toward a goal is very enjoyable. At the heart of the anorexia of artistic avoidance is a denial of process. We like to focus on having learned a skill, on having made an artwork. This attention to final form ignores the fact that creativity lies not in the done, but in doing. I'm writing a screenplay is infinitely more interesting to the soul than I have written a screenplay, which pleases the ego. I'm in an acting class is infinitely more interesting than I took an acting class a few years ago. So words matter and how you clarify them. In a sense, no creative act is ever finished. You can't learn to act because there's always more to learn. Arguably, you cannot even direct a film because you'll always be redirecting it even years later. You will always know then what you might have done and when you do and what you will do next if you keep working. This doesn't mean that the work accomplished is worthless. Far from it. It simply means that doing the work points the way to new and better work to be done. Focused on process, our creative life retains a sense of adventure. Focused on product, the same creative life can feel foolish or barren. We inherit the obsession with product and the idea that art produces finished product from our consumer oriented society. This focus creates a great deal of creative block. We as working artists may want to explore a new artistic area, but we don't see where it will get us. We wonder if it'll be good for a career. Fixated on the need to have something to show for our labors, we often deny our curiosities. Every time we do this, we are blocked. Our use of age as a block to creative interlocks with our toxic finished product thinking. We have set an appropriate age on certain activities, college graduation, going to med school, writing a first book. This artificial ego requirements asks us to be done when we are truly years truly yearn for is to start something. If I didn't think I'd look like a jerk next to the young guys, I'd let myself sign up for an improv class. If my body looked anything the way it did 20 years ago, I'd let myself take that jazzercise class at the Y. If I didn't think my family would consider me a stupid old fool, I'd start playing the piano again. I still remember some of my lessons. If these excuses are beginning to sound flimsy to you, good. Ask yourself if you haven't employed a few of them. And then ask yourself if you can acquire the humility to start something despite your ego's reservations. The grace to be a beginner is always the best prayer for an artist. The beginner's humility and openness lead to exploration. Exploration leads to accomplishment. All of it begins at the beginning with the first small and scary step. Keep going? Or do you want me to stop and then we continue next week?
So I can actually finish us
Sounds
out.
good.
Because I think a good place for us to stop is actually going to be the early patternings, the exercise portion, because that'll be a good place for everyone to just kind of fill in the blanks and start your writing. And then it's going to go into, like the task and affirmations and things like that. So I will, let me just, I lost my page. Oopsie. What page was that, Ghazala?
Sorry, page 140, filling the form.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, like flipped the page and lost it. Okay. So, filling the form. What do I mean by filling the form? I mean taking the next small step instead of skipping ahead to a large one for which you may not yet be prepared. To be very specific, in order to sell a screenplay, you must first write one. In order to write one, you must come up with an idea and then commit it to paper, a page at a time until you have about 120 pages of script. Filling the form means that you write your daily pages. It means that when obsession strikes, as it will, about how the damn thing is not any good, you tell yourself that this is a question for later and turn back to doing what is the next right thing. And that means you write the pages of the day. If you break a screenplay down into daily increments, that small smattering of writing can get done quickly and promptly before the dirty laundry, and it can carry you through the rest of your daily guilt-free and less anxious. Most of the time, the next right thing is something small. Washing out your paintbrushes, stopping by the art supply store and getting your clay, checking the local paper for a list of acting classes. As a rule of thumb, it is best to just admit that there is always one action you can take for your creativity daily. This daily action commitment fills the form. All too often, when people look to having a more creative life, they hold an unspoken and often unacknowledged expectation or fear that they will be abandoning life as they know it. I can't be a writer and stay in this marriage. I can't pursue my painting and stay at this dual job. I can't commit to acting and stay in Chicago or Seattle or Atlanta. Blocked creatives like to think they are looking at changing their whole life in one fell swoop. This form of grandiosity is very often its own undoing. By setting the jumps too high and making the price tag too great, the recovering artist sets defeat in motion. Who can concentrate in a first drawing class when he is obsessing about having to divorce his wife and leave town? Who can turn toe out in modern jazz form when she is busy reading the ads for a new apartment since she will have to break up with her lover to concentrate on her art? Creative people are dramatic, and we use negative drama to scare ourselves out of our creativity with this notion of wholesale and often destructive change. Fantasizing about pursuing our art full-time, we fail to pursue it part-time or at all. Instead of writing 3 pages a day on a screenplay, we prefer worrying about how we will have to move to Hollywood if the script gets bought, which it can't anyway since we are too busy worrying about selling it to write it. Instead of checking into a life drawing class at a local culture center, we buy art form and remind ourselves that our stuff is not in style. How can it be? It doesn't exist yet. Instead of clearing out the little room off the kitchen so that we will have a place to work on our pottery, we complain about needing a studio, a complaint that we ourselves cannot take seriously since we do not have any work to argue our case. Indulging ourselves in a frantic fantasy of what our life would look like if we were real artists, we fail to see the many small creative changes that we could make at this very moment. This kind of look at the big picture thinking ignores the fact that a creative life is grounded on many, many small steps and very, very few large leaps. Rather than take a scary baby step toward our dreams, we rush to the edge of the cliff and then stand there, quaking, saying, I can't leap, I can't. No one is asking you to leap. That's just drama. And for the purposes of creative recovery, drama belongs on the page or on the canvas or in the clay or in the acting class or in the act of creativity, however small. Creativity requires activity. This is not good news to most of us. It makes us responsible, and we tend to hate that. You mean I have to do something in order to feel better? Yes, and most of us hate to do something when we can obsess about something else instead. One of our favorite things to do, instead of our art, is to contemplate the odds. In a creative career, this whole section literally is like being in a session with a client. So kind of to your point, Gonzala, about this psychology aspect. In a creative career, thinking about the odds is a drink of emotional poison. It robs us of the dignity of art as process and puts us at the mercy of imagined powers out there. Taking this drink quickly leads to a severe and toxic emotional bender. It leads us to ask, what's the use instead of what's next? As a rule of thumb, the odds are what we use to procrastinate about doing what comes next. This is our addiction to anxiety in lieu of action. Once you catch on to this, the jig is up. Watch yourself for a week and notice the way you will pick up an anxious thought almost like a joint to blow off or at least delay your next creative action. You've cleared a morning to write or paint, but then you realize that the clothes are dirty. I'll just think about what I want to paint and fine-tune it while I fold the clothes, you tell yourself. What you really mean is, instead of painting anything, I will worry about it some more. Somehow the laundry takes your whole morning. Most blocked creatives have an active addiction to anxiety. We prefer the low-grade pain and occasional heart-stopping panic attack to the drudgery of small and simple daily steps in the right direction. Filling the form means that we must work with what we have rather than languish in complaints over what we have not. As a director, I have noticed that the actors who get work are the actors who work. Whether they are working or not, I am thinking specifically about Marge Notlitsky, a fine stage and film actress who has always made herself available to work and to workshop writers' materials. She worked with the young playwright David Mamet in St. Nicholas Theater Group in Chicago, and now works with the somewhat older and more accomplished David Mamet wherever he is working. Rather than rest on any creative laurels, she engages in a very healthy sort of creative restlessness. When she is not engaged in the run of a show, she often takes a class to keep her hand in, and she always is available for read-throughs of new plays. Like all actors, she suffers from the I'll never work again syndrome, but unlike many less committed actors, she never allows herself to make her work something she does only for others or only when she is paid. Yes, she wants to be paid, and I am not arguing here that actors should work for free. What I am saying is that work begets work. Small actions lead us to the larger movements in our creative lives. Many actors allow themselves the dubious luxury of handing their careers over to their agents instead of keeping their art in the custody of their souls. When an agent is in charge, that's so important. When an agent is in charge of your creative life, you can easily despair that my agent doesn't do enough, instead of asking what you yourself might do to hone your craft. Fill the form. What can you do right now in your life as it is currently constituted? Do that thing. Take one small daily action instead of indulging in the big questions. When we allow ourselves to wallow in the big questions, we fail to find the small answers. What we are talking about here is a concept of change grounded in respect. Respect for where Respect for where we are as well as where we wish to go. We are looking not to grand strokes of change, although they may come, but instead to the act of creatively husbanding all that is in the present, this job, this house, this relationship. Recovering creatives commonly undergo bouts of fierce rage and grief over their lost years. When these creative kriyas occur, we desperately want to kick over the traces and get the hell out of life as it is currently constituted. Instead, make changes, small changes, right where you are. Fill this form with creative care until it overflows into a newer, larger form organically. As the poet Theodore Rothke phrases it, we learn by going where we have to go. We have found that when we fill the form, we do not often need to make large changes. Large changes occur in tiny increments. It is useful to think in terms of a space flight. By altering the launch trajectory very slightly, a great difference can be made over time. So then this goes into the early patternings exercise, which is where we will stop. We are a little bit over time, but I just want to close this out with one reflection and Surah Al-Asr. So, this section I think is so important because it can become a reflection for for our whole lives, really, even outside of the creative realm. And, sometimes people will ask me, like, how are you able to, do the different things that you do creatively and professionally and, familially and communally, etc. And, obviously the answer is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost, gives us the capacity that we have in different seasons of our lives, and the will and the desire. And I think also, some of it is also temperament and leaning into the different parts of our temperament. But then I think that there's also this aspect of when you think about the will and the desire to do something, it always requires, there's got to be action behind it. And I think that, we can start looking at different seasons of our lives from a different perspective. So, for example, I work with a lot of women and a lot of mothers in particular, especially a lot of mothers of young children. And one thing that I like to reflect back is that in those seasons of life that can feel very all-consuming, because of, maybe a child that requires so much of you, or maybe it's an illness that requires, so much of your energy. Maybe it is a parent that is aging and requires so much of you. Just those times in your life where you feel like you have nothing to give or to offer to your creative path and your craft. Those are actually the times when these small incremental moments, over and over and over again every day really, really matter. And I think that one of the gifts that I'm so grateful for is that never in my life have I ever completely stopped engaging with my creative gifts. And I think that, in other seasons of your life where you maybe have more capacity, it shows that you never put the pen down, that you never stopped singing, that you never stopped learning. In those seasons of life, it could be the time where every day you commit 5 minutes. Maybe there's a local class at a library that's being offered for free. Oftentimes that was the case in those different seasons of life where it was like, maybe I'm interested in this aspect of my craft. And this is an area where I haven't had the time or capacity to, or maybe even interest to really like dig deep into. But now this is a season where I can dig more into that. So maybe it's a research season where you're learning and really curious and building your knowledge. Then there's other times where you're in a season of, I can take this class at the library that is being offered for 6 weeks. Those are the kinds of things that I engaged with constantly in those mundane, seasons of life. And that's a strange thing to say because most of life is lived in the mundane, which means that we always have opportunity to engage with our craft on some capacity. So it really is one of those, it's an active choice. And it's a language of love. And so it's another way of extending love to ourselves and to the craft. So I just wanted to offer that, as a reflection to kind of take away and sit with, because I get those kinds of questions all the time from people of all different walks of life and ages. I've gotten this question from young people that I've mentored, when I was a young mother, like, how do you do this? How do you still travel and work? And you're a new mom. Like, how are you doing all the things you love? And I'm like, you can do all the things, but just not all at the same time. And you have to really understand yourself and your capacity, but it doesn't mean that you have to, put those things down and walk away from them. You can just shift the perspective and the mindset on how you're going to engage with it in that season of your life. And And I think that that has really been a gift for me. It's like a gift that keeps on giving. And I think that many other creatives who have that experience could share something similar, that it's a gift that keeps on giving, to never put the pen down and to, just shift the way you relate to it. So I want to leave us with that there, and close out with Surah Al-Asr and extend immense gratitude for everyone staying behind a little bit longer, so that we could finish out strong together. Okay, Bismillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العظيم. Surely Allah speaks the truth. I mean, Jazakallah khair, everyone. Thank you so much for this time together, and I look forward to our next time together. Assalamu alaikum. Good night.
Good night.
Okay.
That was beautiful, by the way.
Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
Bye.
salam. Bye, Noura.
Bye.